night of innocent fun takes an alarming turn.
There's one person in the city of Portland that night who was a monster.
A young woman goes missing.
Amy was somebody you'd be proud to have as a daughter.
Everybody's searching. I mean, the whole city's invested in this.
Police fear the worst.
Did he leave her in the woods? Did he dump her in the water?
The case seems hopeless.
If they don't find her today, we're going to find her.
We had a circumstantial case.
Until a stroke of pure luck changes everything.
It was just unbelievable that that's how it comes down for us.
I'll never forget it as long as I live.
St. Laurent is looking for his daughter Amy after learning she hasn't arrived at work. On her apartment door, he finds a strange note.
Amy!
Amy isn't home, but her mobile phone and house keys are inside. Amy's mother, Diane, is waiting for news.
Hello. I knew something was wrong when I got the phone call from her father letting me know that she hadn't shown up for work. She wouldn't have left her cat without someone to go and feed him. And she wouldn't have just not gone to work. You know, she's more responsible than that. It went against the grain of who she was.
Diane last spoke to her 25-year-old daughter on Saturday night at 10:30. Amy was out with a new friend, Aaron Rogers, who had flown in from Florida for a few days.
And they were going to go in town to get something to eat and a drink or two and just kind of show them what downtown Portland was.
They headed to the Old Port, the bar district in Portland, Maine, about 40 miles from Amy's home in South Berwick.
She asked if I wanted to meet them in town, and I'd already changed the pajamas for the night. And I declined to go in.
Amy St. Laurent has been missing for over 24 hours. The anxious mother reaches out to the South Berwick authorities for help.
As far as the law enforcement was concerned, there really was no issue yet. A 25-year-old has rights. There's a waiting period before they're deemed a missing person.
But Diane refuses to sit still until the 48-hour waiting period expires. She immediately launches a poster campaign.
We had to do something. We felt like we were losing time and just knew that every minute was crucial.
A friend of Diane's in law enforcement lends support. Contacting Portland detective Danny Young.
Yeah, Detective Danny.
I listened to what he had to say, and he told me a little bit about Amy, a little bit about the family.
He learns that Amy is an aspiring model, has a full-time job at a local aerospace company.
Amy was a very good employee who was working her way up. She had a lot of friends there, well-liked. They were surprised when she just didn't come in and never called or anything. And I said, this doesn't sound too good.
Young has an instant personal connection. His daughter, the same age, also named Amy.
I'm thinking to myself, if this were my daughter, I would want somebody to work 24/7 on this.
Okay, I'm out.
Determined to take his partner and investigate, Young seeks the go-ahead from his boss, Lieutenant Joe Loughlin.
These guys have good instincts. They know what they're doing. They've been around a long time. They're very good detectives. And I said, all right, why don't you guys go in and check it out?
I'm going to go out and interview people. I'm going to go out and hit the streets and talk to people and try to develop leads.
Young focuses on the last person known to be with Amy, Aaron Rodgers.
We started by looking for the gentleman from Florida's vehicle.
He calls rental car agencies and confirms Rodgers rented a car at the airport.
It was an SUV, and we got it by talking to OnStar and explaining the situation, and they were able to do a GPS on it, and we were able to find it down in the old port.
Help you, sir?
He came out and saw us around his car and wanted to know if he could help us.
Rodgers claims to have only just seen Amy St. Lawrence missing person posters.
He says he had just called the Berwick Police Department, and I said, why don't you talk to us first, because she disappeared from the old port.
Rodgers is brought in for questioning. He tells Sergeant Bruce Coffin his relationship with Amy was entirely innocent.
Do you know? Just to get to know each other.
They had met previously down in Florida through a mutual friend and spent some time together.
But the detective is suspicious.
There was things that were wrong about him. He would not either answer in a normal way, or he did things differently than I think your average person would have done them. He was very weird. If you were trying to make yourself a suspect, he did all the right things.
Amy St. Laurent hasn't been heard from in more than 36 hours.
She would never have wanted to put her family in the situation of not knowing. I mean, she just wouldn't have done that.
Aaron Rodgers, the last known person to be with Amy on Saturday night, recounts his version of events for police. After Amy called her mother, they went to the Foreplay Sports Bar, where she played pool with two young men.
He told us I don't play pool, that I was right there, so it was okay with me. I was watching her.
Later, they went to a club called the Pavilion. The same two men from Foreplay happened to be there too.
At that point, he said that he didn't dance, so she went out on the floor and danced.
And she was enjoying herself in the evening and dancing with people. They kind of had words about it, and they just sort of kind of went off to their own sides of the bar and did their own thing. It would be logical to assume that he was upset by the fact that she was dancing with other people.
He said that just before closing, he went into the men's room, and when he came out, people were leaving, and he couldn't find Amy.
He was looking for her, and at some point he gave up and just assumed that she had to have left the bar. He had all her belongings with him. He had a pocketbook and coat, ID, all the stuff that she would need. He had all of those things.
Rodgers also had a key to Amy's apartment. He began the 40-mile drive back to South Berwick.
He went south, went to South Portland, and had to get gas.
Then, according to his story, he had to take a toll highway, but was lucky to get on.
He told us about talking to the turnpike attendant and telling her that he didn't have any money. Could he please use the highway? Because that's how he knew how to get back.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody ask to ride for free or be given the option to ride on the highway for free. It just seemed like an odd story to tell.
Rodgers then says when he arrived at her home, Amy wasn't there, so he slept in his car.
He had contemplated, apparently, the idea of actually sleeping in the house, and then said he didn't feel right about it because she wasn't home.
When he got up the next morning, Amy still hadn't returned.
Amy!
He decided to enter the apartment, drop off her things, and wait to see if she would turn up.
He actually used her shower. He had no problem using the shower. He just didn't want to sleep in the bed there.
Finally, tired of waiting, he left a note for her. He claims he never saw Amy again.
The story didn't seem believable. It sounded like he was making it up.
But detectives can't hold Rogers without more evidence. Then fortunately, a new lead surfaces.
3 other gentlemen who had seen the posters down in the old port, because these posters of Amy that was put up by her family were all over the place. And someone in the group said to one of the individuals, "Hey, isn't that the girl that we saw last night?" And they said, "Yes, well, let's go down to the police station."
The men are Kush Sharma, Russ Gorman, and Jason Cook.
They separated us into 3 different interview rooms and proceeded to interview us on the events that took place that night.
Sharma and Gorman tell police they met Amy while playing pool at the sports bar and later danced with her at the pavilion. They're the 2 men Aaron Rogers described. They reveal that later, at about 12:45, Amy approached them saying she couldn't find her friend anywhere in the club and now had no ride home.
That's Aaron, right?
Yeah, Aaron, yeah.
We had planned an after-hours party at my apartment. Gorman, being his charming self, had talked Amy into going to the party.
So she ends up going to Brighton Avenue address, probably a 10-minute drive. And when she arrives there, the party never materializes.
At 1:45, Amy asked to be driven back to the pavilion.
She wants to go back to the nightclub to see if she can find her friend.
Just then, Jason Cook came home from his job as a bar manager.
As I was walking up the steps to my apartment, Gorman and Amy were leaving.
Russ Gorman told me that night when he left Jason Cook's house on Brighton Avenue, he saw Jason.
And I asked them where they were going, because they had been drinking.
Gorman tells detectives he drove straight to the club, dropping Amy off at 2 a.m.
You're out.
Told us that there were several people still there at the pavilion, out front and on the sidewalk and all, and that he let her off there and that he had driven away.
As police work to verify the story, they begin a search of the old port.
We had a search party of detectives that we put together. We searched some areas in town here that are sort of remote.
Amy's mother joins the effort.
We just knew that she wasn't off having a good time somewhere. We were always looking. And every person that passes in the car going by you, you're looking at a person who is walking down the street who's got the right color hair and the right length and the right body build. You're searching.
We have no crime scene. We have no body. We're really trying to put pieces of a complex puzzle together to track this young lady down.
It's now more than 2 days since Amy St. Laurent went missing. Growing desperate, her family and the Portland police enlist the help of the media.
This family was so loving and tight. They were feeling this loss.
I miss her. I want her back. Anything anyone can do to help would be really appreciated.
And I was working as hard as I could and doing anything I could think of to try to end this for them.
While gathering information from family members and combing her apartment for clues, detectives discover a window into Amy's private life.
We got to look at the diary to get insight about her empathy and her altruism and her feeling for the world in general. This was a really nice young lady. She's the type of young lady you'd be proud to have raised.
Detectives look for references to Aaron Rodgers. They discover he met Amy in Florida 3 weeks before her disappearance.
He apparently had got a little bit of an infatuation with her and wanted to come up and visit.
She felt like she owed him because he spent the day showing her southern Florida. She told her friends and relatives, feeling uncomfortable about him coming to the house.
Amy's neighbor casts further suspicion on Rodgers.
We learned that the night before that he had some kind of argument with Amy, and she rebuffs him. She says, listen, you come here to visit me as a friend and as an acquaintance, so there's not going to be any more connection or activity. So get that in your head, and I think he was frustrated with that.
A background check on Rodgers reveals more disturbing information.
We actually found that his previous relationship had been with a woman by the same name, Amy. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but yeah, very weird. And there was actually paperwork filed on account of him harassing her.
Police now suspect he was outside the pavilion when Amy returned at 2 a.m.
And he might have just sort of wandered around the old port waiting to reconnect with her. And probably, if he was already upset with her, became more upset. You could see them actually arguing once back in the car together. And then maybe things got out of hand and he did something to her.
Knowing Rodgers is set to leave Portland, police submit him to a lie detector test.
He exhibited all sorts of behaviors, body language, posturing, eye movements, defensive mechanisms that came out that he was definitely lying. First, his story doesn't make sense. Second, he has all of Amy's personal belongings. Third, he's the last person we think that is seen with her. And now he's lying to us on top of it. And I said, we got the guy.
But they still can't charge him for one simple reason. There's no evidence of a crime. Rodgers is free to return to Florida. At the airport, police seize his rental car.
Our evidence technicians did a forensic review of his vehicle, looking for things like blood or forcibly removed hairs.
Meanwhile, detectives review the timeline of events from Saturday night.
What we were looking for were gaps where there might be an unusual amount of time unaccounted for.
They start with Rodgers' claim that he stopped for gas.
We were able to confirm by a security camera that he had in fact been there.
Next, they check his bizarre toll booth story.
We were actually able to locate the toll booth operator who remembered having waited on him that night, remembered how polite he was, and his whole story of needing to get on the highway without any money.
Incredibly, Rodgers' alibi is holding up. It looks like he actually did lose Amy at the bar and left the old port without her.
That doesn't obviously rule out the possibility that she's in the trunk of the car or in the back seat of the car.
But when forensic results on Rodgers' rental car come in, that possibility is also shot down.
We didn't find anything in this vehicle. Nothing at all.
What seemed to be a very unusual story actually panned out.
Aaron Rodgers is eliminated as a suspect in Amy St. Laurent's disappearance. The investigation is back to square one.
The hope was that she was being held somewhere. What if she's somewhere and cold and wet and wondering why nobody's come to get her yet?
It's now 3 days since Amy went missing. With each passing hour, the likelihood fades that police will find her alive.
We searched South Portland down near the tank farms where the oil tanks are, along the sides of the highway spur.
We were really focused on the water because of the proximity to the house, proximity to the nightclub, and downtown area. Everybody's searching. I mean, the whole city's invested in this, and the whole police department is.
My thought process in a lot of my investigations is, who was that person last with?
Detective Young now focuses on the group of roommates who share the apartment Amy visited the night she went missing.
I made a distinct decision to go back and re-interview people, especially the people inside that house.
They did not tell us that we were suspects, but I kind of picked up and got the gist that we were. And just that feeling of knowing that we were the prime suspects in the disappearance of a young woman from the old port was very nerve-wracking, very scary.
When you were out that evening,
Detective Young asks about Russ Gorman, the friend who offered to drive Amy back to the nightclub.
He had been crashing at my apartment probably off and on 4 or 5 months. It wasn't an everyday thing.
Cook backs up Gorman's claim he returned promptly to the apartment just after 2 a.m.
I remembered Gorman returning back to my apartment approximately 20 to 30 minutes later because I was in the process of writing an email to my aunt.
If their time period, that 20 minutes, was correct, then that means that Gorman would have done probably what he said he did and dropped her off.
Wouldn't give him enough time to have anything to do with Amy's disappearance.
Gorman has a solid alibi. Again, the case stalls. After more than a week of searching, detectives decide it's time to share a painful reality with Amy's parents.
I called Diane and Dennis St. Laurent into the office. In my heart, I believe this girl's gone. She's dead. When I said that, there's a possibility that her daughter is deceased. She looked down and said, I know, I feel it.
Something clicked inside that I just knew I wasn't going to see my kid alive again.
It was a powerful moment, and tough, you know, it's the last thing you want to say to someone.
There's a victim there, and my job is to try to figure out what happened and bring the perpetrator to justice.
Knowing he may now be investigating a murder, Detective Young again returns to the apartment where Amy St. Laurent was last seen.
There are people out there that know you just have to hit the right buttons.
The case takes a sudden twist when another roommate of Gorman tells a very different story about what happened the night Amy went missing. David Grazier claims he and his girlfriend came home at 3 a.m. No one was up. Russ Gorman wasn't sleeping on the couch, as he often did.
What they said is, when we came in, this is where we went, and in those areas we never saw Russ Gorman.
Then at 4 a.m., Grazier got up to use the washroom. And there he was.
Grazier puts him up, awake, fully clothed, including his footwear, and washing up in the bathroom at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Gorman's claim he came home at 2 a.m. and stayed in is now highly suspect. A background check raises even more suspicions.
He has a criminal background. He's a suspect in some theft cases locally. He has history in Troy, Alabama, as well as Florida. And he's also on probation for crimes, too.
The Brighton Avenue apartment becomes a potential crime scene.
The police came to the house. They went all through my apartment, looking for bloodstains.
Detectives believe Cook is lying to cover for a friend.
him knowing that Amy St. Laurent was last at his apartment, was the last time she was seen leaving with one of his friends, whom he let stay at his apartment, who he still had let stay at his apartment even after she disappeared, I think was bothering him. And he, at that point, I don't believe he knew the truth of what happened. He wanted to believe Gorman, but he knew in his heart that there were some problems here.
Danny Young enlists Detective Scott Heracles of the Maine State Police to help pry the truth from the new suspects.
What I was brought in for was to go visit Jason with Danny and just take him through it again nice and slow and see if it was going to hold up.
Detectives find no evidence to support Jason Cook's claim that he was writing an email at 2 a.m. when Gorman supposedly returned from dropping off Amy. When pressed for an explanation, Cook makes a surprising admission.
I had not been honest with the police at first.
He then recounts a conversation he had with Gorman the morning after Amy disappeared.
Gorman told him, Jason, you remember when I came back. It was 15 minutes, right?
That was his way of coaching me into not being honest. I was wrong in what I had said. I was trying to protect Gorman because I did believe he was innocent.
Now cooperating fully, Cook and Sharma tell police Russ Gorman is known as a ladies' man.
He's intently focused on picking up women, almost a different girl every night.
Gorman viewed them as a piece of meat. He didn't seem to me to be like a relationship type person.
The detectives tracked down some women who had encounters with him.
Some of which just said he was incredibly forceful and they just didn't say no. And others said that they felt like they'd been drugged.
Did Gorman slip something into Amy's drink that night? His roommates don't know, but they do know she was feeling pressured by him.
She didn't feel comfortable at the after-hours party because Russ had tried to talk her into having sex with him.
In my view, this guy's a sexual predator, and that's what he's focused on.
Violence, intimidation, lust, lies. Russ Gorman is now the prime suspect.
Did he bury her somewhere? Did he leave her in the woods? Did he dump her in the water? We wanted to find out where she was.
You admit to seeing her that night. Now,
Police bring him back in for questioning.
My job at that point was to get him to tell me what he did that night, so I could see if I could knock holes in that.
A crack in his alibi appears when Gorman insists he saw people milling outside the pavilion at 2 a.m., the time he claimed he dropped Amy off.
The bouncers at the pavilion were very adamant that once it closed, they were shooing people away every night. By 1:15, 1:20, everybody was gone.
Gorman sticks to his story.
I think he thought it was a little bit of a game for him. And I asked for consent to search his vehicle. He denied it, said he was busy that night, he couldn't go without his vehicle.
Young moves quickly to secure a warrant.
We already knew that he had given Amy a ride. Fingerprints in it wouldn't have been a big deal because we knew she was in it. But if we found her blood or a forcibly removed hair in it, it would have been different.
But no evidence is found.
That car was immaculate.
And then we found out that Gorman actually had taken his vehicle and detailed it.
He cleaned it and scrubbed it right down, which leads us to believe that something happened in that car.
Thanks so much.
Police are even more alarmed when they learn of Gorman's history with his mother, Tammy Westbrook.
In his words, she was nutty. She was abusive.
He certainly does have some deep-rooted issues with his mother. Gorman had several outbursts where he was violent, was certainly threatening towards her.
Could this toxic relationship have poisoned Gorman? Even sent him over the edge to commit murder? When interviewed, Tammy Westbrook refuses to talk about her son.
I always felt like she knew exactly what had happened. When we talked, she just pleaded with me not to ask her any more questions. That was her son, and she couldn't say any more.
I was extremely frustrated and angry at her for perpetuating what was going on.
But without Amy, police have no concrete evidence. They have to find her, alive or dead.
That was the motivating force for why we were coming to work each day.
Police try a new tactic. Perhaps Gorman himself can lead them to Amy.
What we did was put a bird dog surveillance system onto the bottom of Gorman's car. What that does is allows us to track that vehicle's movement.
Detectives enlist Gorman's friend, Kush Sharma, to call and set the plan in motion.
And he told Gorman that the police had found Amy. We thought this would be our opportunity. Gorman would run out to his vehicle, drive to the scene, and we'd all know where Amy was located.
But the suspect doesn't take the bait. Police wait all night long in vain.
And Gorman never left his house.
Desperate to trip him up, police decide to pressure Gorman by leaking to the media that he's a suspect.
So the information was out there that he was the last person with the missing girl. People in Portland were shunning him because it's a tight community in the Old Port. So I think he was changing who he was with, who he hung around with, changing locations where he went to drink and to play pool, because he didn't want to deal with the Old Port and then the people in the Old Port.
But Gorman still isn't talking, and no solid evidence against him has surfaced.
It just seemed like, you know, if we didn't hurry up and do this, winter was coming, and he was going to get away with this.
It's now late November, 4 weeks into the case. If Russ Gorman is Amy's killer, he's covering his tracks well. But the stress of being a suspect seems to be taking a toll. Gorman leaves town for Alabama to stay with friends.
We thought that would be good. We thought that people who were afraid of him here might talk to us if he were gone.
But Gorman's mother, Tammy Westbrook, maintains her silence. Then, in a lucky break, her boyfriend Rick provides a vital clue.
I just kind of, oh, by the way, did you ever borrow a shovel? And Rick said, well, yeah, he did recently. He borrowed my shovel. He said he was going to help a friend put in a fence. From what we understood talking to his friends, people that knew him, this guy's lazy. There's no way he would even handle a shovel.
If Gorman borrowed a shovel to bury Amy, police desperately need to find the grave. And time is running out.
We had snow coming. The chances of us finding her after that were probably pretty remote.
Gentlemen, I'd like to share something with you today.
Pat Dorian from the Maine Warden Service is brought in to organize a massive ground search.
We're going to be sending some...
I have been involved in numerous searches for lost and missing people. We have an organized team in Maine.
Does he have a lot of experience outdoors?
We meet with the detectives, find out as much information as we could about what they were working on, timelines, time frame, talk about the suspect, about the victim.
Dorian inputs information about Russ Gorman into advanced mapping programs.
We had to look at places where he worked, where he hung out, obviously where Amy lived,
He calculates the distance Gorman could have traveled between 1:45, when he left with Amy, and 4 a.m., when David Grazier saw him. 17 areas emerge as likely sites where he could have dumped the body, but police don't have time to cover them all.
We had a huge area to go in.
In a last-ditch effort to narrow the search, Detective Young runs a check on Gorman's vehicle.
An offline search is done on the National Crime Information Computer, the NCIC computer. Any police officer in the country that stops you or your vehicle, or just runs the plate on your vehicle, it's in that NCIC.
What he finds is stunning.
I remember looking at it and I couldn't believe it. I had to double-check the date.
Russ Gorman was stopped by Westport police for a headlight violation at 3:15 on the night Amy disappeared.
And then I said, look at the time, he's out.
That was like crucial, huge information that obviously blew his whole story out of the water.
Got some information. Look at this.
It narrows Gorman's timeline for the murder down to 90 minutes and dramatically shrinks the search area.
It eliminated where Amy lived, eliminated a lot of the interstate looking that we had proposed to do.
We ultimately triangulated an area where Amy has to be in this prescribed 5-mile radius.
Saturday, December 8th. 7 weeks after Amy's disappearance, more than 100 people join a massive ground search.
And they walk in a single file in the same direction with a GPS and a compass.
It's gonna snow, and if they don't find her today, we aren't gonna find her.
It went to downright depression and hopelessness because you didn't think we were going to find her.
Then at 1:30 p.m., a searcher feels his boots sink into the earth.
It looked like somebody had freshly dug there.
He could see what he thought were spade marks.
That's when they started calling for the canines.
When the cadaver dogs finally hit on the grave, Danny Young does what we call a test hole.
I dug down a little bit, and within 14, 16 inches, I felt down there, I felt something. I could tell it was part of a gray sweatshirt, which we knew that's what she had on that night.
Imagine that, after all that work, that he actually touches, poor Amy St. Laurent in the grave.
We had spent so much time being so worried about the situation that we may never find her. It was just unbelievable that that's how it comes down for us.
Even right now, I can feel, a chill in the back of my neck.
With the weather moving in, the body must be exhumed quickly. Margaret Greenwald, Chief Medical Examiner, is in charge.
There was only about 7 or 8 inches of soil, and then there was this big wooden form that was lying directly on top of her body, and then soil on top of that. The actual body was about 23 inches under the top of the soil.
I was excited. At the same time, I got to tell Diane that we found her daughter buried in the woods.
Diane?
I just got it out. I said, we found her. She's buried. I don't know how she was killed, but we found her. She's coming home.
There was the sadness and the pain and the hurt that they didn't find her alive. It was a great sense of relief that everybody was not going to live their whole life just wondering where she was.
right then and there, as we're uncovering Amy, it starts to snow for the first time that season. And you just had a feeling that this case was going to work out.
Police hope the shallow grave of Amy St. Laurent will hold the clues they need to convict her killer.
There was some type of blunt trauma to the face and the mouth. On the left side of the skull, there was a very typical round fracture that indicated it was a gunshot wound. One of the species of insects that we found showed that she had actually been left on the surface for at least some period of daylight before she was buried.
The partially clothed body points to some kind of sexual assault. But the scientific evidence they need to link Russ Gorman to the murder can't be found.
We didn't come up with any DNA. We don't have the weapon that she was killed with, and we lost a lot of evidence at that crime scene because of decomposition and other factors.
Police face a devastating reality. They may never catch Amy's killer. But then, another twist. The suspect's mother, Tammy Westbrook, finally breaks her silence. She reveals her son has just called home from Alabama with some chilling news.
Okay. He confesses to her what he did.
He says, I shot that girl. I shot her on the head.
The only people that would have known she'd been shot in the head was the perpetrator and people in that autopsy room. That was all. So that's when we knew that he had done it.
Police in Alabama move on Gorman, who surrenders after a 5.5-hour standoff.
He barricades himself in a house, puts 2 guns to his head, they have a standoff, you know, all those things that happen. We thought that he was ultimately going to kill himself, but he didn't.
Bottom line is they ended up, I think, trading a cigarette or a piece of pizza or something for the guns, and they ended up arresting him.
Heracles and Young travel south for a final interview, hoping Gorman will either confess or put his false alibi on record again.
It's like I told you already. He repeats his alibi, drop the girl off, front of the pavilion, back to my house, that's it, done for the night.
Heracles then blindsides the suspect, revealing he knows about the headlight violation.
At that point, he stopped and said, I better talk to a lawyer, and he didn't want to talk to us anymore.
As police prepare their case, Tammy Westbrook testifies before a grand jury about her son's over-the-phone confession.
Okay, Mom, I did it. Is it true that is his first nightmare?
Yeah. We'll get home.
Police now believe they know what happened on October the 20th, 2001. Out for an innocent night of fun, Amy couldn't know the charming Gorman was actually an experienced predator.
You can expect that she was reluctant to take this ride with Gorman, but she was reassured that it would be fine. She was desperate, and she needed this ride.
Gorman never returned her to the club.
And if he did plan to give her a ride, it was going to be at a price.
I think you're so beautiful.
He tries to put the moves on her. Long girl. She resists. He starts punching her in the face. We know that he did that assault because she has broken bones in her face and a chipped tooth. I also think there's a possibility that, she had GHB or Rohypnol, a date rape drug. And then takes a gun out and brings her to familiar ground near his mother's house and facilitates a sexual assault against her.
He never fully got her underwear off. She fought him every inch of the way and ultimately hit him hard enough to make something snap in him, and he shot her.
When the officer stopped Gorman that night, he had just killed Amy St. Laurent.
The very next day, he borrows the shovel. Then he goes back and he digs.
The grave's location explains why he never left the house when his friends called and said the body was found.
He could look out his back window and see that the police weren't there.
Gorman is undone by his hurried burial of Amy and a trail of lies. But 1 year later, when the case goes to trial, his fate is far from certain.
We had a circumstantial case. We didn't have any DNA. We didn't have the gun. And that's why, obviously, Tammy Westbrook's information, the mother of Jeffrey Gorman, became so critical.
On the stand, Westbrook delivers a surprise that threatens to derail the entire case. She claims to have no memory of her son's confession, even though she described it to a grand jury months before.
She doesn't remember a thing. She doesn't remember a thing. I said, well, come on now. She testified under oath. You've got it recorded.
I'll never forget it as long as I live.
The tape of her grand jury testimony is ordered to be played before the court.
When he looked at her, and he saw my face, he pulled out a gun, and he shot her in the head. And he said, "You ought to be glad it wasn't you, Mom. You ought to be glad you're not dead."
Russ Gorman is found guilty of murder.
The family of Amy St. Laurent, obviously there were audible gasps and crying, you know, just crying with joy, really.
You're the monster that murdered my little girl. I know no other way of looking at you.
No reaction from Mr. Gorman.
He receives a sentence of 60 years.
The good thing is Gorman's in jail, where he can never hurt anybody again.
As a team, we put it together and we're able to give a closure to the family.
I think they embraced her spirit, the person that she was.
Diane Jenkins has since created the Amy St. Laurent Foundation, dedicated to the prevention of violence against women and children. And in a park near her home, there now stands a permanent memorial to Amy.
You can do the best job with your own kids and teach them as well as you can and get them to grow up to be really good people, but you can't control other people.